No Place Like Oz, Chapter 19. Silence. Terrible, awful, horrible silence. It was only broken by the sound of my voice cracking. "Aunt Em!" I screamed. "Uncle Henry!" There was no response. I knew there wouldn't be. I fell to the ground in front of the house, sobs racking my body. What have I done? She was dead. Uncle Henry was dead. Tears rolled down my face. My throat closed up. It hurt so much. They were my only family. They had loved me despite everything. I choked on my tears. Why had it ever brought them here? I should have left them in Kansas, where they would have been safe and happy. They hadn't asked to come. All they wanted was to go home, and I wouldn't let them. No, it wasn't my fault. It was hers. She had done this to them. I shook with rage as I saw Ozma back on the ground, crawling to her feet, where she'd made her own crash landing. The clouds thickened, growing darker above me. My shoes hugged my feet like a vise, glowing like they were made of red lightning. Ozma stared back at me in shock. "You did this!" I shrieked. "You killed them!" I walked toward her, the rage burning me alive. It felt good to hate her this much. Natural. Small forks of lightning flickered off the shoes as they throbbed with a magical pulse. But my heels weren't alive. I was. The pulse was my heartbeat. Their magic was part of me now. A scream ripped out of me as another magical surge punched through my body. I felt like I was about to explode into flames. As I walked steadily toward Ozma, screaming louder and with more anguish than the screaming trees in the forest of fear. She staggered backward as I rushed at her, her face contorted in fear. "No, Dorothy, please. Don't let it control you. Don't give in to it." "Too late for that, princess," I screamed. As I said it, I felt all of Oz screaming along with me. "Please calm down. You've no idea what you're doing. You can still save yourself. Think about this." With a roar louder than the lion's, I unleashed every last bit of magic that had been building unstoppably inside me since I got to Oz. It was wondrous. It surged through my body, flowing like 1,000 rivers, cascading violently and crashing on the shore. It drained from the land and the sky, up through me and right at her. She screamed as I hit her with pure energy, streams of purple and green and red lightning shocking and sparking as it struck the ground all over us, and over again. She didn't fight back. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she'd used up everything she had summoning my house. Or maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she was too scared. I didn't know, and I didn't care. I just wanted her dead. I wanted it to hurt. But she didn't die. When I used up everything I thought I had, I was sure that I'd see her lying on the ground in a mangled, bloody heap. But Ozma rose to her feet, easily, steadily, as if it was nothing. She was more powerful than I'd realized. She had changed. I hadn't hurt her a bit. I might have made her stronger. Ozma's entire body turned the color of midnight and shadows. It looked alive, like there was a black smoke churning just beneath her skin. Her eyes were hollow, golden caverns. Her scepter was a lightning bolt that stretched into the thick clouds overhead. "You have no idea what I am," she screamed with 100 voices. "I am the blood of Lorraine and the daughter of Ancient Flower. I am the first and the last and the in-between. I am Oz." She slammed her scepter into the earth, and a swarm of black moths came bursting forth out of it. They flew from me, knocking me backward, clinging to my skin, trying to suck the life out of me. But the shoes protected me. Without me even trying, they wrapped me in a red light, and the moths burned away as if I was a candle whose flame they'd been drawn to in the dark. I regained my composure. Ozma had taken everything away from me, everything I cared about or would ever care about. She had taken away Glinda and my aunt, my uncle, my magic. She had tried to take away my kingdom. "I am Dorothy," I screamed back at her. I closed my eyes and knocked my heels together 3 times, begging the land of Oz to fill me with darkness and power and all the enchantments it possessed. It did. It all came bursting out of me. This time, it was more than magic. It wasn't just the shoes at work. It was me. It was the reason I had been brought here in the first place. It was the reason I had been brought back again. It was that wanting I'd known my whole life. All that hope that there was something better out there, something that could be mine and mine alone. Ozma was no match for it. She'd never felt anything like it, I don't think. She had all this, and she didn't even care about it, but I cared. I wanted more. My desire was a tornado that twisted out of my body and danced toward the princess, catching her up in its funnel, lifting into the air as easily as if she was a feather. She screamed and struggled against it, but there was nothing she could do. It was no use. She was powerless against me. She may have been the one true princess, the delicate peach blossom in the blood of whatever her name is, but I was the girl who rode the cyclone, the girl who had slayed the witches. I had been brought here against all odds, not once, but twice. I wouldn't be denied. Within the clone of the maelstrom, I watched calmly as Ozma's dark form began to tear itself apart in a gruesome explosion of black and gold. It was like she was unraveling, like she was melting, and then she was gone. For the third time, Oz had chosen me. The sky had returned to normal. Everything was quiet. The storm I had summoned faded away into the distance. It was like none of it had happened, except that my head was throbbing and all of my limbs were aching in exhaustion. And the old farmhouse was still standing there, invincible and mostly undisturbed, with my poor aunt's feet still sticking out from underneath. I looked away. I couldn't bear the sight of it. Then my eyes caught a sight of her. Ozma was lying on the ground, her crown knocked up from her head and her scepter 10 feet away. Her dress was streaked with blood and dirt and her face was bruised and swollen, but she was breathing. She sat up and looked around. I took a step forward, ready to keep fighting, ready to do whatever it took. Then I saw that she was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile either. It was dazed and vacant, and her eyes were empty, like old tarnished marbles. She looked at me and cocked her head. "Who are you?" she asked stupidly. I lowered my arms. "Ozma?" She giggled an idiotic giggle. I pointed at her and tried to call out more magic, just a little bit more, enough to snuff her out once and for all, but all that shot forth from my fingers were a few useless red sparks that faded quickly as they had come. I had used it all up, for now. I figured it would take some time to recharge. Ozma didn't seem to understand that I wasn't exactly her friend. She clapped her hands. "Oh, that's lovely!" she cried. "Do it again." Before I could try anything, a high-pitched yipping noise filled my ears. "Toto!" I spun around. In all the commotion, I had forgotten about my dog, and when I searched for him, I saw Glinda standing there, right next to the farmhouse. Her pink dress looked like it was made from the sunset herself. Her eyes were kind and gentle. She bent down to pet my Toto, who was bouncing up and down happily at her feet. And when she stood up, she caught sight of me and beamed, picking up the skirt of her dress, racing forward through the grass to greet me. "Dorothy!" she cried, her voice strong, sweet, and joyful. "My beautiful, powerful, angry Dorothy! I knew I could count on you, and I was right. Just look how right I was." She gestured toward Ozma, who had her arms outstretched and was whirling around, making herself dizzy as she laughed and tripped over herself, oblivious to anything that was going on. "What did I do here?" I asked. "Oh, you did what you had to do," Glinda said with a shrug. "You couldn't kill her. I don't think it's possible to kill her, at least not without destroying Oz, but still, ding-dong, as they say." Glinda threw her head back and let out a long, metallic chortle. I was a little confused. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Think of it this way," Glinda said when she'd stopped laughing. "You've taken Ozma's power, and you've given it back to the land, back to Oz, where it belongs. She was trying to hoard it all for herself, you know. That's been her goal all along. That's why she hated me, and why she wanted your shoe so badly. She just wanted to hoard its magic, like fairies always do." "I thought the fairies gave Oz its magic." "Oh, she told you that old tittle-tattle, now did she? I'm sure you didn't believe her. Those fairies are greedy little creatures. You can't just stand to see someone else with even a drop of magic to speak of. You did what you had to do. You did what was right, and Oz will thank you for it, some day. For now, you'll have to settle for my thanks. You saved me, Dorothy. You can't think of how terrible it was for me to be locked away like that." "How did I? Once you took care of Ozma, the prison she was holding me in ceased to exist. Poof! Just like that. Of course, I came to find you right away. I've been worried about you all this time. It's a miracle I was able to get you those shoes at all. But, you know, even all chained up, even in the darkest of dungeons, this old girl has a few tricks up her sleeve." She wiggled an eyebrow at me and laughed again, but this time she stretched out her arms as she did and gestured for me. "Oh, come here, you foolish dear thing." As soon as she said it, I fell effortlessly in her embrace, and suddenly found myself sobbing as she pulled me tight against her bosom. "My aunt," I managed to say through tears. "My uncle." Glenda held me close. She kissed my head and squeezed me even tighter. Aunt Em had hugged me before, and of course I knew that she had loved me, but there has always been a certain distance between us. She never wanted children, and even though she had tried her best with me, I always knew I wasn't quite part of her plan. Now, as Glenda kissed and hugged me and stroked my hair, I wondered if I finally knew what it was like to have a mother. "Darling," she said kindly, "I'm so sorry about what happened to them. It just couldn't be helped, and you know what?" "What?" I asked, as she let me go and I stepped back. She took my arms, held them at my sides, and I looked lovingly into my eyes. "You'll have a new family now, a family who loves you more than you can imagine." "Who?" I asked. "Why, me, of course, you silly goose, and the Scarecrow, and the Lion, and the Tin Woodman, and oh, just about everyone in Oz I can imagine. You're their new princess, you know, and you're sure to be the most beautiful girl in the land, before long if you're not ready." "I'm to be princess?" I asked. "Who else would be?" Glenda asked. "Her?" She pointed at Ozma, who was kneeling in the grass sniffing curiously at a patch of buttercups. "Well, they'll still call her princess, I guess. All the fairy magic makes it unavoidable, la-di-da, but as you can see, she won't be good for much from now on. When we get back to the palace, I'll see that she issues a decree making you deputy princess and protector of the crown. Won't be too difficult. We'll set her up with some dolls and play and toys and let her run around in her own quarters while you sit on the throne and do all the most important princessing work, with my help and guidance, of course. They'll forget all about her soon enough. The people of Oz have short memories, bless their hearts. And they'll absolutely adore a new monarch. Oh, the coronation we'll throw for you." I looked over at Ozma and Glinda, and then over at the farmhouse. I wasn't sure of any of this. Aunt Em's feet were pointing away from each other at odd angles. She was wearing the same ordinary leather boots she'd worn on the farm. For all the fancy new shoes she'd been offered here, she refused to give them up. Glinda saw the doubt in my eyes. She frowned sympathetically. "You poor thing. You always were a sentimental sparrow." She waved her hand at the house. "Poof!" she said, and as soon as the words escaped her lips, my old home, along with my aunt and uncle, disappeared in a shower of pink bubbles, like they've never been anything there at all. I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I felt my sobs easing. "There, doesn't that feel better?" "It does," I said. As soon as the reminders were gone, everything that had happened in the past couple of weeks felt very far away. "It doesn't matter where you come from," Glinda said. I came from some place too, you know. Some place not different from Kansas. I'll tell you that story some day, if you can possibly stand the boredom." "I'd like that," I said softly. Glinda smiles back at me. "Good. Very good. Now, why don't you leave all this useless sadness behind and go back to the palace? We need to pick out a nice crown." She put her arm around me. "Doesn't that sound like a good idea?" It did. It really did. Glinda turned to Ozma. "You too, darling," she said. And the princess scampered toward us, almost tripping over her own feet. "You two could be like wonderful sisters." Ozma nodded eagerly and took my hand. Glinda winked knowingly. "Well, maybe more like distant cousins," she said to me in a strange whisper. She put her arm around my shoulder, and we began to walk back to the Emerald City. "Now," Glinda said, "you must tell me all about your adventures. I was able to watch some of them while you were having them, but I have to say all came a little bit gobbled, like listening to a radio with a broken antenna." I looked back over my shoulder. The house was gone. My aunt and uncle were gone. Ozma was flapping her arms as she skipped aimlessly through the fields. She wouldn't be much company. But Toto was racing behind us, and I had Glinda and all my friends at the palace. I had my kingdom. My shoes sent a happy wave of magic shooting up through the body. In an impulse, I grabbed a fistful of it and tossed it in the blue sky, where it burst in a pink and gold firework. "That's my girl," Glinda exclaimed proudly. "Oh, I can't wait to show you what can you really do with it. You were born to be a sorceress, you know." It was too good to be true. It was almost like Kansas was just a dream, and I was waking up to a wonderful new morning where everything was bright and sunny and full of life. They say you can't go home again. Well, I'm proof that's not true. Home isn't where you're born, it's where you belong. I found my home, and I let it go. But I came back. Now I was home for good, and I never, ever make that mistake of leaving again. The past was gone forever. There's no place like here.